Oh,
Hi, everyone. My name is TJ LaGrow. Today, I'm going to be talking about ChatGPT. It's been such a hot topic lately in just the news, even, but in the ML world, in the RO world, this has been sort of captured the imagination of a lot of people, and a lot of people have been playing with the new tools such as DALL-E 2, such as Midjourney, and ChatGPT is just the newest one in terms of these large language models. And the implications of this innovation really is wide stretching. And I thought it was kind of an interesting moment in sort of the history of ChatGPT to talk about it with this group. So with this talk, I have three goals. Why should we be talking about ChatGPT? I want to talk about the history, sort of zeitgeist, consequences, use cases. And then I want to really go into details of ChatGPT because our group, likes a little math. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the chunk of this presentation I really want to talk about is ethical quandaries. Really, is this progression towards AGI? I know we've talked about that quite a lot, especially people who are interested in consciousness in this group, especially, or explainable machine learning. Ownership of data, what does that look like? And then best integration into sort of our daily lives and classroom management. Great. Let's give a history of OpenAI. This is sort of the company behind ChatGPT, if you didn't know. It was founded about 8 years ago. Specifically, these people that I have listed here are the founders that were publicized as donating the $1 billion investment towards OpenAI. One of the bigger names on here, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, of course. But Sam Altman is the one who's been really driving a lot of the outward press for OpenAI. As we sort of see here, they sort of recruited the best engineers and they gave them NFL salaries, yada, yada. But major milestones that really OpenAI tried to give to the public was, one, they wanted to be a nonprofit. So they wanted to have explainable AI. They wanted to be more agnostic to sort of government entities. But then they also wanted to have favorable AI for altruistic purposes, yada, yada. It really, at the time, if you go back and look at the discourse between these head engineers of many of these companies, it felt kind of like a marketing ploy for goodwill amongst the greater public. But this is all pre-COVID. Past COVID, the dialogue has changed slightly. And that is mostly due to clouding resources and this idea that models aren't necessarily bad. It's just the amount of resources that you have and the scale of them. So for here in 2017, OpenAI was only spending 8 million-ish for cloud computing versus DeepMind, which was going closer to $500 million. And this is when DeepMind was doing more things like AlphaGo. So with that being said, in 2018, Musk resigned, so he's still not a part of it, just because Tesla was also developing large language models for self-driving cars and has a conflict. So Musk is not a part of this. The big transition that I really want to point out is this capped per profit transition, where they went from a nonprofit to a for-profit. They say explicitly that any investment can only be capped at 100 times that investment. That is interesting because Microsoft then a month later invested $1 billion in OpenAI, which means that they assumed it was going to make $100 billion. They wanted to spend the money within 5 years and said it's probably not sufficient enough. They were correct. In 2020, GPT-3 was announced. DALL-E and DALL-E 2 were announced in 2021, 2022. And then they had ChatGPT announced about 3 months ago, with over 1 million signups in the first 5 days and over 100 million active users today. It is currently, they project $200 million in revenue this year and $1 billion next year. But the big announcement is that Microsoft just invested $10 billion into the company, which means they assume they can make $1 trillion off of this, which is the number that Google is worth. This is the first major competitor, in my opinion, that Google has had in a long time. And even the president of Google back in November was so stressed about this. They changed many AI groups to focus more on large language models, and the BARD system that ultimately failed a couple weeks ago with their earnings call. But just to give you some context on why this is so big in our current time. Of course, there's been announcements even in the last couple of days that ChatGPT is now introduced into Bing. You can have the beta users. They just downweighted the model. The use is now more publicly available. It's a paid plan now. So things are moving quite rapidly. Any questions on this before I move on? Great. History of ChatGPT. So after they became for-profit, the models started to roll out. They at first started to call it the API, is sort of what was termed within the company to try to keep the secret sauce under wraps. But most of these models were sort of developed in private and then released into the public last year. All of these are links that you can go look at the different models, but essentially the difference between GPT-3 and GPT 3.5 is that they were trying to give the public access and make the API accessible to outer parties and to start, making money off of calls to the API. But this is just to give a little more context and sort of the history development of specifically GPT itself within OpenAI. But I wanted to also think about how popular ChatGPT is. This is a rough estimate done by Life Architect. There's a lot of different sources that I'm trying to pull from here, but essentially, ChatGPT, you can read all of these as well, but the highlights that I wanted to point out is 100 million monthly users as of January. This is about a month ago. That's insane. With crude math, probably 310 million words per minute are being generated with that. Going through sort of calculating it, how it compares to tweets, it's outputting around 110 times the equivalent volume of tweets every day. And then even just thinking about sort of the Gutenberg's printing press since the 1500s, if there's an average of 50,000 words per book, we are probably estimating that ChatGPT is producing the equivalent of the entire printed works of humanity every 14 days, which is quite a lot. One really fascinating thing that I ended up finding was, here we go, let's go to the next slide. There's a lot of really fun resources, and this link will be within the, I guess, I don't know if you are seeing that on my screen, but
we're seeing that, yeah, we're seeing that.
Okay. Great. There's over 50 different examples of different ways you can use GPT, ChatGPT, and sort of people that are using the API for different plugins, for different apps. Like you even have a WhatsApp bot here. There's a Twitter bot for it already, Discord bot. But there's many comprehensive lists out there for people using the technology. And so it is ever growing and rapidly expanding. So if that gives you any clue on why this is important, I hope that at least gives you some inclination for some achievements. Why is this even, why should we care about this? Is it actually sentient? Should we start to consider it as sort of another person? Probably not, but there are some interesting tests that it did pass. SAT analog score. It's got an IBM Jeopardy Watson questions it passed.
Can I interrupt? Sorry, how did it pass the Visual Ravens progressive matrices test? It's visual, right? And it's patterns, it's not words.
Yeah, I am not quite sure. This is a running list that the Life Architect started to put together that I wanted to add to this because it's interesting to say the least, but that's a good question. There are links here. I would have to dig in further. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but big things are even in the next slide. These are the more recent ones, especially after December last year. It passed a medical license exam, legal exam, accounting, MBA, politics. The big thing that I want to point out, though, is that these are very like passing scores. They're not excelling. They're not getting outstanding marks, but they are passing the tests, which is an achievement in itself. Like they're a B student, or even last month, it looks like ChatGPT was hired as a software developer at Google. And so are we going to get replaced? Probably not. but it's interesting to say the least of what they're doing with the technology. Another big thing to highlight is Time, which is one of the biggest magazines of the year or of the world, ended up making it the cover art for the February edition, which is also kind of crazy. But we haven't seen that level of software exposure since GANs were introduced by Ian Goodfellow. So it's kind of a interesting milestone, at least in software development. With that history being sort of given in context in the use cases there, let's talk about what a large language model is. I'm sure many of us already know sort of the fundamentals of what probabilistic methods are. So we're trying to find the observation given a certain language, given different strings of text. We want to say like what, for example, is more English than the other. And so we have these different strings and what's the probability that it's more English. We can then rank them based off of sort of these tokenizations of the actual strings itself. But then it depends on the problem and how we give context to what we want our algorithm to be doing. So whether or not it's producing more English terms, whether or not it's translating between certain languages, it would sort of pair these four strings in different ways. And so with that, language models specifically use recurrent neural nets, which most of us are familiar with, where we are using sort of different inputs to try to generate outputs in various lengths of strings. A lot of these were developed to get rid of sort of catastrophic forgetting and learn long-term tokenization methods. So LSTMs and gated rectified units were used to try to solve a lot of that. I'm not going to try to get into some of those details, but mostly what the architecture for this model uses is transformer blocks with many attention layers. One thing that most of these companies are trying to keep under wraps is the exact model size. The difference from OpenAI when they were a nonprofit versus a for-profit is everything was pretty outward facing when they were a nonprofit, but now they can keep everything under wraps during the for-profit. This is the same with Google. This is the same with Baidu. This is the same with any of the South Korean companies that are also trying to do this as well. So mostly we have these generic examples of the transformer block. I am unsure how they structured their architecture. However, we can talk about the language model size. And so these are the number of parameters that each of these models have. This is insane, in my opinion, going on to hundreds of billion of parameters. We'll talk more about how much it costs, how long it trained a little later in the presentation, but to give real examples, GPT-3 is right here in the red dot. We have Gopher, which is Google's big language model as well that Bard was trained from, then ended up semi-failing. It's got almost twice the number. Lambda is Meta's. Palm is, I believe, another one of Google's, but it does something a little different. Flamingo is another one of, or Chinchilla and Flamingo are both Google's, but they are more for smaller, lightweight, single chip language models. But just the sheer size of the parameters should give you insight to how long and how much data potentially is needed. One fun challenge that both Google and OpenAI started to get into at the beginning of 2022 was once they had their models finally trained after a year, they started to see people using the APIs for malicious intent, or they could use it for malicious intent. There's always been this idea of how do you make searches safe, and especially with Google, that has been one of their primary objectives over their course of their company. But they need this level of safety. In just for an example, with Chinchilla going into a more of a outward-facing model, they needed this level of safety, which had to be defined internally. There's 23 different laws or rules, I should say, of what they're looking for in terms of what data can be produced based off the model. And then they go into this reinforcement human factor layer where they're fine tuning what the model is producing. Without this RL HF layer, most of the outputs would be gibberish to us. And we'll talk about that a little more in detail. With that being said, this is the outward facing report on how, this is the only diagram that OpenAI has given us about what ChatGPT does. This is from their paper on Instruct GPT, which is what GPT 3.5 was eventually renamed, or ChatGPT was eventually renamed to. So essentially, they have these 3 different steps. One where they're collecting their prompts, and they have some kind of mechanical Turk on AWS where they have human labelers trying to report whether or not, or how to report a different text is more English or not, or very minor binary distinctions between prompts. And then they use this data set and the labeled data set to fine tune using a supervised learning method. This initially was, this whole step 1 was ChatGPT 1 and 2, whereas step 2 and 3 are more for ChatGPT 3. And then as they got more and more examples, they incorporated more reinforcement learning, human factorization into it. After they've collected the data and the reward, they want to reintroduce sort of the outputs to human annotators. So this is, for an example, like DALL-E 2 gave 4 different outputs. You would choose which one would most likely, that you feel is the best response to the prompt, given a variety of different factors, such as English, such as best definition, word ordering, etc. And so they call these LO scores, which is a lot of times a moving distribution that they can factor in given a new algorithm coming in. And so as these reporters are giving more information, they're able to fine tune their reward model. As they start to collect more and more data, they're able to use sort of this PPO algorithm, which is a hard reinforcement learning algorithm that is proximal policy optimization using a policy gradient. So changing the way that they decide on what kind of outputs given an input. And we're going to talk about this a little further.
I have a question. So this thing is being trained continuously, right?
It is not at the moment. So from my understanding, the current model does not have a continuous update. They have a layer that they can input data that have new labels to change the distribution using a KL divergence to try to slightly shift the model, but they don't have online updates.
Okay, so because you said that every 14 days it produces a lot of stuff, right? So it doesn't take long that every, for example, 20 days it produces it doubles the amount of information on the internet. So are they gonna, do they know how they're gonna stop this model from learning from its own output?
Yeah, that's a great question. From what I know, they only keep the last 30 days of a produced output, just because they don't have the servers to keep any more than that. You are correct in terms of just doubling the size of the human.
But people are gonna keep them on internet, right? It's easy to get the output and someone else put it on internet. So
what I'm saying is, if you have a query that you give ChatGPT right now, in 30 days it'll be gone because they can't store that data. So if you have used ChatGPT, it'll have something in sort of a sidebar that'll be your past queries. Those will go away after 30 days, is what the CEO Sam Altman said recently in a tweet. But I can get that data myself and keep it for myself and upload that myself. Oh yeah, sure, right? No problem. Yeah, okay. We're generating all the time in terms of internet content.
You're right, Ashkan. If it starts to saturate the internet with its output, right? It's the same problem we talked about with the art.
Yes, I was thinking that there has to be some idiot who tries that, right? And then,
well, it's even just if they decide, oh, we need a new data set, and they go and try to scrape Twitter again. Who knows how many of those freaking tweets are created by ChatGPT now, right? You can't, like, people are not going to be, saying, oh, this tweet was written by ChatGPT for forever. So it's just going to be an oversaturation of its own output that's not labeled as such. It's a huge problem for these models, I think.
Well, one limitation I need to say about these models is they are not good for information past January 2021. Any recent years, there's not as much data, or people haven't written as much about it, or they have some kind of bias on Twitter or something, or since the language models were introduced to the internet, they don't want to scrape it. So they have made hard connotations as it gives any information pre-2021. So they do sort of have a limitation on that, but I don't know how that's going to develop or change over time.
That makes sense, because all the other models like GPT-1, 2, they all started since 2021, and also I read somewhere that since Google and OpenAI, all those companies, they have another unit which handles all the bias and all the ethics. They had like an ethics team, so they tried to scrape all the negativity and all the negative news or speeches till the 2021 data itself. So there has not been any attempt before the 2021. So it doesn't make sense.
I'm skipping just ahead a little bit, just because you brought up a nice point. They do have a team. However, they outsourced most of the work and labeling for this to Kenyan workers earning less than $2 an hour. And the outsourced laborers was exposed to very toxic content. And a lot of them described it as torture throughout the day, and that there was just not enough time to do any of these inquiries. Yeah, so they do have some kind of mechanism.
Good thing for an ethics committee to decide to do, right?
Yeah. But yeah, let's keep moving just so we can get to some of these discussions, because I know we're already 26 minutes in. But so breaking down these steps a little further, I got this from Hugging Face, since they're a great resource for a lot of these large language models. You have sort of the initial training of the data set with your prompts to the language model. You'll get your initial language model. This is the second step, where they take the ELO scores and they implement sort of the last layer as an RL HF layer to be able to give you more appropriate and human generated sounding answers. On top of that, they formulated an RL problem where they have the action space, which is the policy of all the tokens and vocabulary. Rewards function is a combination of the preferred model. They use this PPO algorithm with use of KL divergence for the loss function. Here we see this is where they are updating sort of the change using the different loss. How that looks more visually is this is a vanilla policy gradient objective, where you're given some reward and you want to better match the two distributions if you find that they are just slightly off. In this example, the right graph will have a smaller KL divergence or KL distribution over, or KL loss over the two distributions than the left one. And so as you use that, you would choose probably the right one more. To give further math on it, this is the math associated with the KL divergence and the loss function with this. And then with PPO, you will be the real update here is going to be this B function, where you're making it an adaptive KL divergence. So this is a hyperparameter that you also have to tune. So this also makes training extremely long as you're using this on the last layer, which is another reason why they don't do online updates currently, especially since they're getting throttled with new users and new prompts. So what would it take to train ChatGPT yourself? Well, you can do it. All you need is a supercomputer with 10,000 GPUs, 285,000 CPU cores, $1 billion investment from Microsoft to start. Staffing, chief scientist was paid about $2 billion in 2016 with a team of 120 people. So probably $200 million for staffing in the first year. Time, just to collect the data set, Eleuther AI spent greater part of a year and a half to 2 years collecting what they call the pile, which is the data set that they use to train these large language models on. This is being scraped from Reddit, Wikipedia, Google, most medical journals and academic journals. And then I believe they're also being scraped on many of the social medias, but that's put into a separate category. This produced about 400 billion tokens, which is quite a lot, especially because Google is now spouting that they have a trillion token model, which doesn't sound feasible even to process. But now after you have all of that, it'll take 9 to 12 months of straight training. And this is roughly about 300 years worth of a parallel training on all of these GPUs and CPUs. And so basically, with all of that being said, you will still have some issues, and it sounded like OpenAI had some issues in their first 3 years trying to do develop these, but after last year and they got all the model trained, then they were able to put it out there. But that is if you really wanted to spin it up yourself. There are many different countries and announcements of other companies trying to do this at the moment. So thinking about the challenges that they have in front of them is kind of insane. But we do then get to.
Do we know how much energy it was used for training the whole thing?
Energy is
How many cities worth?
Yeah, I would say $1 billion worth of energy.
Yeah. It has to be a mid-sized maybe countries.
So I would say because Microsoft just reinvested $10 billion into this company, and it was under 5 years that they used $1 billion, I would say a good chunk of it was just for the server use, the server uses and everything. We could probably do rough calculations on what this might mean of 12 months of straight or 10,000 GPUs just overclocked. I'm not quite sure how much energy that would be, but probably too much. Great question. But now I kind of want to pose to the group. These are some of the big issues with ChatGPT right now. Labeling data, how we actually get to a corpus that is large enough for these tokens. Many of the leaders of our field have said that it's not the model's fault, it's just the size of the model, and we need to make everything bigger. And so to make everything bigger, we need bigger data sets, of course. And so we start to use these things like Mechanical Turk or outsourcing. Is that great? Do we need to spend hundreds of thousands of human hours doing these kinds of things? Jailbreaking. A lot of people have tried to take off the safeguards that are actually put into play, these safety layers that many of these companies are trying to put. However, there's many examples of people trying to break these large language models, such as here, the Molotov cocktail, nuclear bomb, different types of hate speech as well, and then accusation of bias. Because this is so widely publicized right now, of course, it's going to get political in our current climate. And so there's a lot of back and forth between what is deemed as too right, too left, as I put in quotes. But there is a sense of bias that might be added in, especially since we add this human layer of dialogue between the software and us. And so they have responded, or OpenAI has responded saying that they'll try to make these issues distinct going forward and describe arguments from more historical people in movement with facts rather than trying to make an opinion based off it. And they're still working on this opinion-based response. But these are my big questions that I sort of want to pose to the group. You can take a minute and look at them. I'm fine starting anywhere. I know we have about 30 minutes left, but these are really what I would like the group to start if you have any insider chat. The first one being the one that I'm most curious about is like, how do we cite ChatGPT? Has anybody used ChatGPT to write part of a paper or take an outline and actually do it? Because it's pretty good at that.
Yeah, do you cite Grammarly? And as you said, Adobe Illustrator, but I don't recommend using Inkscape and cite them, of course. Yeah,
I
open
don't
source, but Google search, Stack Overflow is kind of trying to force us to cite them by, writing those rules. I doubt anyone cites Stack Overflow in their code, and then especially in their publication if they use Stack Overflow. So, do you cite library? Yeah, do you go to library? Well, it's the same as Google search now, but did we cite libraries when they exist? Like this is the
I mean, that's different, right? You go to library, open a book and read the book. You do not write something and copy it. It's a little different, no?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I think it is a little different because you have to read it yourself and then you consume it and then write it. But the issue with this is that if you do the thing, if you input your thing and then copy paste that stuff, which is happening and will happen. But it's really important for it to give citation too, because you do not go and read 10,000 books at once and get a sentence. You read each book separately. But this for example, it's like reading 10,000 books and give you a sentence. You want to know where that sentence come from, which book, which part of the book, right? It's different than I think libraries or even a Stack Overflow, right? Because we.
So what I mean, even if you cite ChatGPT, what are you telling the reviewers? Did you just use the whole? Did you use ChatGPT to generate the content for your papers?
So actually, we asked ChatGPT to summarize papers for us, and it summarized it.
No, it's no.
I listened to podcasts for that as well, and so what? Like, why? It's another tool, but
yeah, I agree with, because if we use something like Maple or Mathematica to like solve an integral for us or something, I think it's the same, similar.
Yeah, I mean that would just create like kind of a trust issues even for the reviewers and for those who are reading the papers as well, because you don't know like what you've written by yourself and what ChatGPT has written for you. It might just it might be just like a bad example, but still I would not cite ChatGPT, even though I mean I might take help from it, definitely. But then it's just like I'm asking my peers for help, and I'm asking them, what should I write? What should I do with that? That's all. I won't just cite the whole person just for asking their help.
no, but that's actually an issue. Is like, are we thinking that this database is a person? Like we're citing. We're not usually acknowledging the tools that we use in the acknowledgement section, maybe. No one acknowledges LaTeX anymore and blah, blah, blah. Like as the tool becomes familiar, we're not so excited to acknowledge that everyone is using it's just a tool. Co-authors are actually persons of some sort. So are you, like Ashkan, are you?
I think there is a difference between a tool that generates stuff and a tool that that is more linear. These things generate stuff. So comparing that to Mathematica, because it's not like we ask Mathematica to do something and Mathematica write the formula, solve the formula.
Essentially, you do. Essentially,
no,
you do.
You write
an integral.
You write the integral. As I said, the example that you gave about libraries, we go to library, open a book. It's not even close in scale or generation. It's not.
Yeah, well, we want it to be not close in the scale. We want the progress to be faster. So I don't see a problem. We want to help ourselves. We want to be faster.
No, I'm not saying actually don't use it. I'm just saying that this should give citation for the stuff that I don't understand. First of all, we shouldn't use it for writing papers now, right? It's stupid. But
why not?
For future. I mean, now it's beta essentially. So you are gonna use.
So I'm gonna be real with you. I know many people who write copy for both business books, for copying. For copy of like newspapers and for just TV, and they're using ChatGPT and not citing it.
I'm talking about academic.
Yeah, no, so I'm saying that
papers.
too. I mean, so what is a review paper? It's a synthesis of many different papers in your field as well. When we cite review papers, it is a critical thought.
So we asked him to summarize 2 papers. It technically gives similar result. So.
Yeah, or I could even say Copilot right now is generating 30% of code on GitHub. Should we be citing Copilot for writing our software?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we should, first of all, we should say citing ChatGPT. We should say we use ChatGPT, but the question is that it's not actually the thing that I'm talking about. I'm saying that if ChatGPT generated something, it should give somewhat of citation for those things that it has generated, and we include them for academic paper specifically.
But then who is it helping exactly? Even if I read this sentence like this code was written by Copilot, who is it helping? What difference does it make if I write it or not?
No, but that's not what Ashkan is.
What I mean,
I
I'm
see
really
both sides of the
surprised.
argument. But I do feel like there's something different, whereas if it's capable of actually making novel intellectual contributions as to just not cite the source of where that came from, it's a little bit disingenuous, I think.
Yeah, but is it capable of making novel scientific contributions at this point?
That's a substantive question, but that's aside from the issue that I'm raising, which is that if it is on that assumption, if it can do that, then should it be cited? And I think, yeah, I don't think it seems to me to be a little bit disanalogous to like going to a library and reading books and synthesizing the information yourself. Because it's actually, if it is capable of synthesizing it in a novel, creative way, then.
And what is a normal creative way? Let's get to the core of it.
Yeah, that's a good question, but we have to start somewhere.
Is it different? Is it doing anything? Are we doing anything differently than ChatGPT is doing? Let me flip the question.
I think certainly we are.
Are you sure?
Yeah, there are gonna be similarities, but yeah, of course, certainly human beings have different capabilities than this.
No, we live with that assumption. Of course, we want to be unique and kill animals without any remorse. But is that true? As a scientist, can you analyze what are we doing besides combining different information? Creatively combining usually means that other piece came from somewhere no one else expected, but you're still combining the pieces to create new stuff that existing pieces.
Right, sure. So if you grant that argument, then shouldn't we be citing it? If it's essentially doing nothing other than what we're already doing. So you raised the question of personhood.
Yeah.
So what defines what?
There is
what
no personhood in a feed-forward database, basically.
But on the assumption that it's doing the same thing that we're doing, how are you making that?
Well, I'm worried about humans, but I'm not worried about the tool. It's more about describing the humans.
But if the tool can do the same thing humans are doing, why would
something is about humans, right? The way we thought about us.
I'm so happy for philosophers of ethics.
Oh yeah, they have so much work now, they can enjoy it. Yeah.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
from a non-coding background,
Yeah.
or humanity? Has there been any comparison? So back when I had to grade political science papers and there's the software where you put the paper in and it tells you it scrims the internet and it tells you how much it matches other papers.
Yeah.
Has there been any comparison?
Plagiarism check or something.
Yeah, is there any comparison about if you were to just take papers written by ChatGPT, how it compares percentage wise compared to just humans?
Yeah, absolutely. They've specifically, since they only released the model 2 months ago, they're sparse, but they are building many explainable models, or not explainable models. They're trying to have an autoencoder be able to distinguish between ChatGPT and non-ChatGPT writing.
Well, no, but that's not the question, right?
No,
Sorry.
yeah, that's interesting, but yeah, that's not the question. That's just obviously for there's typically some allowance for a certain percentage of plagiarism caught by these plagiarism checkers, just because again, there's only so much you can write that's new. So I wonder for the percentage of plagiarism from a ChatGPT paper, is it comparable to humans? Is it less? Is it more? Has there been any study for that?
I don't actually know. One thing that, because there are so many users on ChatGPT regularly, the difference between GPT-3 and GPT 3.5 is the limit of output that they give to a single user in single inquiry. So it'll only generate 5 paragraphs usually, max.
Okay.
You can tell it to generate more, and you can tell it to generate in different styles. You can give it a piece of writing, but
non-technically, you can get it past you can get it past a plagiarism bot currently without
yes.
a custom without a custom build for a model detector, essentially. And so between current like plagiarism like methods, ChatGPT seems to be basically foolproof at this point.
Okay.
But it looks, thanks, Kevin, but it looks back to Ashkan's concern is like, or I don't know, Ashkan, like your idea is, can we attribute what it writes to sources? Right?
I've done it.
It's not a foreign idea. I don't know why people are against it, because in science you have to cite everything that you write almost. So I don't know why it's you write stuff and give it. For example, if you want to write the introduction for your paper using ChatGPT, instead of reading paper, you ask it to scrape internet and come up with the introduction for your project. You should give citation. We do that already. Even if you say humans, we do that already. It's like, it needs citation. It needs to provide citation. It's just
no, but you must have not used ChatGPT for real work, because what you're describing is still sci-fi.
Oh yeah, I mean, for future, but you have to plan for it, because it's gonna happen sooner or later.
Well,
right?
Alexander here is working on a way, to make a language model give citations for certain ideas and stuff like that. So in the future, it will generate you an introduction that cites proper papers, etc., etc. So it will cite all the sources for each of the sentences it writes for you. But right now, it does create a text with citations, but citations are totally made up. They're very realistically looking. The journals do exist, the authors and stuff, but then, this was true stories. Somebody told me yesterday, and then Google doesn't find the paper. Okay, we go to the journal, that specific issue. There is no such paper. It makes up stuff that looks good. So currently, it's just the text. It's not like, it's not doing what we think it is.
So then maybe that is a good segue to this third question. What would it take then to trust or buy in to sort of this kind of tool? If Bing is going to be the next Google, what would it take for them to outperform Google? What does it take to get adoption? What would make you use it more?
I was very impressed by an animation I saw yesterday on Twitter with ChatGPT 3.5, where they put all essays of Paul Graham, tokenized them and put them into ChatGPT 3.5, and they started asking questions about those essays. What does it take to start a startup company? And it would generate a paragraph according to Paul Graham, blah, blah, blah. And then it would pull certain essays that it took it from. The ideas are coming from this 3 or 5 essays. I think it's already there. To take this kind of technology, I think, is what we need. Oh, and sorry, since I have the mic. Another thing is when it starts talking back to me, when it will start asking me, did you mean this? Did you mean that? How? Well, look, I can't answer your question exactly, but if you change this part of your question, there is that answer, and then that's what we need. It's a perfect assistant.
So the dialogue back and forth to really redefine what exactly you're asking.
Exactly, to try to figure out what I want. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I like that. Anybody else? What would it take for you all to use ChatGPT alone and never Google again?
If it is easy, I mean, it's easier. People are gonna use it. It's actually, there is no reason. I mean, right? They don't care a lot about the ethical aspect of it. Humans don't care about the ethical aspect of something for it to use it. It's right. They are gonna use it as long as it's easy. So it's actually ethical degree ref citation or these things doesn't matter, right? Especially if it can provide the answer that they want, right? If it is not biased based on the person who is using it, they're gonna use it. So
yeah, can I add something?
Please.
So for me, I have already started to see this. I mean, people are doing it. But if it takes for me to write a paper 3 months and someone does it in 3 days using ChatGPT, I am gonna not care about ethics anymore. I am gonna save my time and start using ChatGPT to pump out papers as well, because if people can do it and can move ahead in their careers, in their life and such, there's no incentive for me to follow ethics anymore.
But maybe your notion of ethics was unproductive.
Yeah, probably. And I also think, it's just it's really a sorry state right now, because ChatGPT has created problems, but the owners or people who benefit from ChatGPT are not concerned about solving these problems. I mean, I just saw on Facebook a ChatGPT group, like 20K members. They're like distributing accounts and such, and obviously people are using ChatGPT to cheat in like a massive scale. So.
Well, of course they're going to cheat. I mean, it's easy. It's just like you said. If I have access to all of the test bank answers for a physics test, I'm going to go look at them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
why
that's
not?
the thing. And if everyone is doing it, obviously sooner or later, people who, for me as an academician, technically, I think it is important for me to be able to detect bullshit when I see it.
Of course.
If there is a false claim or a wrong claim in a paper, it is as an academician, I should have the skill to detect it. And people who are using ChatGPT are essentially bypassing that part. They're going to become academicians. They're going to have citations and everything, but they are not going to have the skill to detect bullshit as an academician.
No, but
You can ask ChatGPT if it's bullshit.
No, but ChatGPT writes. That's what ChatGPT writes. It writes bullshit. And then it will not pass 30 years. It will not, because like it cannot.
Until ChatGPT is reviewed.
Yeah, if reviewers and editors and journals are using ChatGPT to check stuff, then it's garbage in, garbage out, of course. But ChatGPT is not producing, like I'm sorry, Salman, this latest concern is kind of weird. It is like,
yeah.
Currently it's very crappy. I mean, the text that it writes doesn't make sense at all. It's incoherent. It's not like, yeah, I mean, it does smooth grammar. That's like, as a grammar checking tool, it's fantastic.
But in the end, it's just like a language generation model. So if you look into it, even if you put a prompt, you might not really get the answer that you're looking for. And so the beauty about ChatGPT or any language generation model is that it will write in such a way that you will definitely believe it. Unless and until you second check it, you might just copy paste the whole thing and just put it for any, put it as a paragraph for any paper. So so that's why I think I'm seeing a lot of tools which are coming in. I saw a few in Twitter as well. Like they have specific tools in which they are detecting like what is true and what is false, and what that has been generated using ChatGPT. And I think that will be, if they incorporate that part in the actual ChatGPT API as well. Like for example, if I give them a prompt and they give me the whole paragraph, and in there they also cite from where they have taken this information and from where they have actually put up the whole paragraph, that would make me trust the whole paragraph much more than what they are just generating out of the
I actually saw someone do it. They put a paragraph in ChatGPT as an input and asked if this is generated by ChatGPT or not. And ChatGPT said, yes, this is generated by ChatGPT. So it has the capability already. So.
Yeah, but then did they also test the other way around? Did they just write something by themselves and then ask if this has been
I also saw evidence of someone doing that and getting a false positive. Like ChatGPT said this is AI generated, even though it was not. There are examples of music and painting that has been flagged false positive by AI as well. So we have to see the
I mean that makes sense even for generative models, like for image generative models, right? When So a trend came where people were asking, actually, where people were making their own art using prompts. So there was a discussion, there was a debate like, this news came that one of the art contests by this AI generated art, and then all the artists, they were like, they were discussing, should this be allowed or not? So again, this whole domain has been there since a long time, but nobody's actually asking like if this should be allowed or not. So it actually only depends on the user what they want to do.
Yeah,
it won't make me trust it more. It just would make my life easier, but I don't know if
putting the responsibility on the users has never worked. It has been shown again and again and again. If you put, because it's like, oh, Facebook, oh, the users can know what is good and what is bad. No, they did not do that, right? That was a lot of hate speech and everything that went on Facebook.
Right.
Putting the power on the users. It's been shown, as Salman said, time and time again, users will always choose, most of them, choose the easy way out. For cheating, they're gonna cheat, so it's putting them on their responsibility, I think, is a kind of first of all, it's the mentality that the big companies try to push, and it's because they don't want to do the hard job of designing something correctly, because it's not in their interest. At least I think, right? It's like, but putting the responsibility on the users to understand what is good and what is bad, when has that ever worked, right? It's like, it's never worked. It's good on paper, but it doesn't work on internet, at least. So I don't know.
Yeah, it is just a difficult problem to solve that people who are more interested in their bottom line don't want to bother about. So,
but then this is the reason it was made in the first place as well. It was made to make users' life easier. So it's also solving that problem, but it's also a problematic area in that.
But engineers as a whole, we are really bad at understanding the consequence of the stuff that we make. So I think it's important to talk before saying that, oh, ChatGPT isn't capable of doing this now, so it's okay if you don't think about this. No, it's just time. It's just time. 2 years, 3 years. It gets there. It's easy. I think it gets there very easily, right? To be honest, one of the first things is that the government should come and they should try to have a way to label the data. Is it, or this data should be used in labeling or not labeling? Right.
The
For example, if I don't
governments already have all of these models. You kidding me? I would make the assumption the government, the DoD especially, has all of these models.
I know that, but I'm saying that, for example, if I am an artist and I build an art or whatever, do I want my art to be used as a training in the training or not? Right. I think it should be up to the person who created the thing first, if their creation should be used. And that was the issue that happened with DALL-E, right? The artist was saying, well, I created this, but now DALL-E is copying me because it's trained on my stuff. But no one asked.
They themselves train on others.
No, you bring that up. The scale is completely different.
Yes, exactly. Humans are so slow. Don't you hate that?
Which is
we have 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so just to wrap up, I got one slide left. Things that you should sort of keep in mind, since this is a snapshot today. Things are rapidly evolving. Like, even I think I saw yesterday, Navier was just announced by South Korea company. Yandex is a Russian company that they all proposed by the end of the year they'll have it. Another model that's comparable and competing with ChatGPT. So just be on the lookout. I think Baidu is one of the coolest models coming out that is doing both text to speech, and they're also doing text to image generation, and they have the best image generation versus some of these adversarial examples like color association to different objects within a picture. But yeah, this is just more of a comprehensive list of what to do. This is just funny to me because Jan LeCun, who's one of the pioneers of our new AI world, said that ChatGPT is not well engineered, but then had a model come out the next month. So I just thought it was funny. But to sign us all off, this is the Dolly 2 prompt of thank you in Sparkling Beach, but still doesn't do words correctly. So thank you all for listening and discussion. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Like we're right on time and we can continue offline, I guess. Thank you to Jay. Thanks everyone who contributed to the discussion.